Hi guys, today we break down one of the most powerful and truthful speeches ever delivered on the world stage, spoken by none other than Barbados Prime Minister Motley, a leader who does not whisper, a leader who does not bow, a leader who stands in the United Nations and speaks on behalf of small nations who refuse to be ignored. This speech is more than politics. It is a warning, a wake-up call, and a demand for fairness in a world to silence smaller voices. And let's dive into the message that had the world listening.
Who sees us and who hears us? We continue to be confronted by problems of blacklisting, which pale into insignificance when compared to climate change, but which destroy our financial sector. The illicit flow of weapons, such that the ease with which people can go into public spaces and shoot and kill others is now regarded as just another item on the news because we promote profit in the manufacture and trade of guns and weapons, of non-communicable diseases that strike down our people in the most insidious of ways because we allow diets that promote the prosperity of a few multinational corporations to become the norm of the day with the food that we eat and the lives that we live. And in the case within our own community, Belize and Guyana continue to face challenges to their territorial integrity. I suppose people feel that because we have talked so long about Belize and Guyana and Cuba, that we can continue to talk about climate change and these other things, and that it is okay for it to be another tick on a UN General Assembly speech. These are all threats to our stability, to the people's stability in our lands. But you know, since last we met, there are other instances and circumstances, not of our making, that may yet destabilize us. And we say it over and over, but we ask who is listening. And you know, we don't come with tales of woe only. The Caribbean has produced excellence. It really has. Nobel laureates, sportsmen who have excelled and are the best in the world of their type, artists, the best in the world of their type, leaders who have inspired previous generations and current generations. We don't come here as a proud people asking for handouts. We don't want and will not be mendicant. What we want, no, what we need is fiscal and policy space. Fiscal and policy space to achieve sustainable development, to be nimble, to adapt, and to innovate in ways that allow us to be true and faithful to the task of bringing prosperity to our people, or as in the theme of this General Assembly, to eradicate poverty, to educate our people, to include all such that there's not some outside and some inside. We want an international order equally that recognizes that there must be different policy prescriptions to suit the circumstances that we all have. And we can still be friends, small and large, north and south, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, all different races, all genders. An equitable and just international order that is truly built on the principles of justice and fairness for all and not just for some. A United Nations that recognizes that as 74 years old we must be able to have difficult conversations as mature people and solve them. Many in the developing world were persuaded or required to abandon policies that were designed for the majority of our population to be transformed. And those policies were fashioned to adopt a consensus that was settled in Washington, D.C. and named thereafter. And that ultimately, regrettably, was about the consolidation of wealth in the hands of a very few. And that's why we have seen the growing inequality that we have seen in the world over the last few decades. That is why too many people over the world have become cynical about governments and about the benefits that they can bring to them. The fueling of the greed of a few threatens to undermine what little gains we have made since independence. And we judge ourselves harshly because independence is a recent phenomenon for us. Others who have taken 150 years to get where they have gotten are still stumbling and falling. And you want to judge those who have had less than 50 or 60 years to operate in a world that has not been made in their image and that does not reflect their interests. This is the fate, my friends, of simply too many. And Mr. President, despite our small sizes, the 14 countries of the Caribbean community have been able to play leadership roles of international import. I can't stand here today without talking about St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that has become the smallest nation of the world ever to be elected to the Security Council to sit on it. We are proud of them. In addition, and I want to speak to this, because when CARICOM was confronted with the unfolding situation in Venezuela, I accompanied the then chairman of CARICOM, the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, to meet in this building with the UN Secretary General in January of this year. And we met with many delegations, and some said we were wasting our time, and some said the time for talk was already over. And we said then, as we say almost 9 months later, the time for dialogue, the time for talk, my friends, can never be over in a world that wants peace and prosperity. We don't take sides, but what we know is that you cannot propel war over dialogue. The people of Venezuela must be allowed to decide their own future in accordance with the principles of the United Nations Charter. Principles of non-intervention, non-interference, prohibition of the threat or use of force, respect for the rule of law, human rights, and democracy. It is regrettable that other multilateral organizations have not followed their own charters. And that is what makes the actions of our Secretary General of the UN more laudable, for refusing to breach his own charter and take actions even though member states have hurled into the recognition of those unelected. Our Caribbean Sea must remain a zone of peace, and for that we shall fight. Mr. President, I speak plainly and without fear, because from independence, Barbados' foreign policy has been premised on the simple principle of friends of all, satellites of none. Barbados, therefore, has always remained and will remain proud.
Motley begins with a simple, powerful question. Who is paying attention to the struggles of small nations? As she stands at the UN, she reminds the world that while global powers push their agendas, small countries continue to face blacklisting, financial pressure, and systems designed to weaken them. These problems may seem small compared to climate change, but they can destroy an entire financial sector, and the world barely notices. She highlights a terrifying truth. Weapons flow into communities with shocking ease. Lives are taken, families ruined, yet the world treats it like just another news story. Why? because the global weapons industry puts profit above human life, and small nations are left suffering to the consequences. Motley exposes another silent killer, non-communicable disease. Why are Caribbean people getting sicker? Because global food systems controlled by multinational corporations promote unhealthy diets for profits. Food that harm us is advertised as normal, while corporations thrive. She points out that Belize and Guyana continues to face threats to their territorial integrity. But the world acts numb of these issues. Just like climate change, repeating topic year after year without real action, it becomes a checkbox in a UN speech instead of a global emergency. Motley warns that destabilization continues to grow, often caused by countries more powerful than the ones suffering. And yet, even as they speak and warn and plead, who is listening? Then she shifts the tone. She reminds the world who the Caribbean truly is. Home of Nobel laureates, home of world record athletes, home of globally respected artists, home of leaders who inspire generations. The Caribbean does not come begging. They are not broken. They are not asking for pity. As she says boldly, we don't want, and I will not be, mendicants. What the Caribbean needs is not charity, not sympathy, not handouts. What they need is fiscal and policy space, room to grow, innovate, and make decisions that actually support their people. Space to fight poverty, educate citizens, include everyone, build sustainable economies. Small nations want the freedom to shape their own futures. Motley calls for an international order built on fairness, not favorism. A world where different nations can have different policies, yet still be friends. A world where justice is not reserved for the wealth and powerful. And she challenges the UN directly. After 74 years, it must be mature enough to have difficult conversations and actually solve them. Motley exposes how developing nations were pressured into policies created in Washington. Policies that benefited the few and made the rich richer. These decisions widened inequality, created distrust in governments, and weakened the very countries trying to rise. She reminds the world that many nations are only 50 to 60 years old, trying to survive in a system never built for them. And despite all challenges, Caribbean countries still lead. St. Vincent and the Grenadines became the smallest nations ever to sit on the UN Security Council. A moment of immense pride for the Caribbean. This proves small size does not mean small impact. When the crisis in Venezuela escalated, CARICOM stepped forward. Mia Motley, along with regional leaders, met at the UN. Some countries told them dialogue was pointless. Some say the discussion was over. But Mia Motley disagreed. She insisted that as long as peace is the goal, the time for dialogue can never be over. She closes with clarity. CARICOM does not take sides. It stands with principles, not politics. War cannot come before conversation. Venezuelans must choose their own destiny, and the UN Charter must be respected. This is the Caribbean's message to the world. Mia Motley voice is not just a voice of Barbados. It's the voice of every small nation fighting to be seen. She reminds the world that fairness is not optional. Peace is not optional. Justice is not optional. If powerful nations truly want global stability, they must listen to the voice they have ignored for far too long. And thank you for watching. If this breakdown inspired you, make sure to like, share, and comment your thoughts. Let's keep the conversations alive because change starts with awareness.